Okay, so the next concept that we are going to look into is the politically exposed persons, PEP. In short form, we call it PEP. So politically exposed persons review is one of the most important aspects of your anti-money laundering and KYC due diligence, right? So before understanding the review of politically exposed persons, let's look at the agenda, right? What are we going to cover in this concept, right? So to start with, we will try to understand and define what is politically exposed persons, and we'll also look at a lot of examples for politically exposed persons, and then look at what is the risk that is associated with these politically exposed persons, and then we can look at the regulatory and compliance aspect of this topic. And then there are two important principles that we should go through, right? And then we can look at the types of PEPs, different types of politically exposed persons. And then we can see how do we identify a politically exposed person, right? And then we can look into the compliance response or the escalation. So what would a bank do if they identify a politically exposed person? And finally, we can also look into a real life case study, right? So yes, so let's start by defining the politically exposed persons, right? Now, any individual, so basically politically exposed person is basically any human being, any individual who is holding a significant position, right, in a public office, right? In simple terms, right? So any individual who is the head of a public institution, right, or a government office or a government institution, government related institution, right? So we call such people as politically exposed persons. Now these people have a lot of power, right? So the power is derived from the position in which they are sitting, right? Basically, so that position will give them a lot of power to influence the people and systems around them, and thereby there is a high chance that these kind of people who derive a lot of power from the position can influence the people, can influence things and systems around them, and they can commit to some kind of financial crime. Now especially, right, if you look at a public office or a government institution, politically exposed persons are more subject to bribery and corruption. So bribery and corruption is one of the most common financial crime that is associated with politically exposed persons, but that is not the only crime that they are associated with. There could also be other risks as well that are associated with politically exposed persons. But understanding PEP, very simple. Any individual who is holding a very big position, the head position of a government institution or a public office, is considered as a politically exposed person, right? Now let's look at some of the examples, right? So here we have the list of examples, right? Head of legislative bodies, some people who are part of the legislative bodies, like, you know, you have your president, right? You have your prime minister, you have your member of the parliaments, right? So people who are part of the legislative body, who make the legislation, right? Who make the rules, governing rules. So those people are considered as, so we generally call them politicians, right? Yes, so all politicians will fall under this politically exposed persons definition. And the second is the executive bodies. So executive bodies are basically those government institutions which execute the rules and regulations that are made by the politicians. So basically you have your IAS and IPS executives, top-notch executives, who basically execute the rules and regulations that are made by the politicians. So these executives are also considered as politically exposed persons. And the third is the diplomatic roles. So any country will have many such roles as diplomatic roles. Basically these people represent a country on an international platform. They deal with a lot of international issues, right? So these heads of diplomatic organizations, like your embassy, right? Head of an embassy is also considered as a politically exposed person. And then you have your judiciary bodies, your courts, right? top people, right, like Chief Justice of India or Attorney General, right? So these people, right, in the judiciary, the head of the judiciary are also considered as politically exposed persons. And then you have your state-owned enterprises. So basically state-owned enterprises are nothing but they are state-owned institutions, state-owned businesses like your Indian Oil Corporation, right? Indian Oil Corporation is a state-owned entity, right? It is a business, but it is a public limited, it is owned by the government, right? So the head, I mean the people who are sitting in the top positions of these kinds of institutions are also considered as politically exposed persons. And then you have your heads of central financial institutions, right? For example, in India, the central financial institution is your RBI, right? Reserve Bank of India. So the head, the governors of RBI are considered as politically exposed persons. And then the chief of the army, right? So the head positions of armed forces of a country are also considered as politically exposed persons. And heads, right, or any person who is holding a very important role, international sports committees, right? So in ICC, right? So BCCI, so the heads of these institutions are also considered as politically exposed persons, because all these people, if you look, all these people are sitting in a position, in a top level position, in a public office. And finally you have heads of international organizations. International organizations, for example, you have your United Nations, European Union, right? World Health Organization. So basically the top officials, like the heads, the presidents, the heads of these institutions are also considered as politically exposed persons, right? So the most important thing that we need to remember is it is the public office, not the private office. So the head of any public office will be considered as a politically exposed persons. The list that we have in front of you, that you have it in front of you, all these institutions are not private institutions. All these are public institutions, government bodies, right? Yeah. Next. So next thing is, let's try to understand what are the risks that are associated with politically exposed persons. What is the risk with these people, right? So you have your politicians, you know, you have heads of different organizations, but what is the risk for the bank is something we need to understand. Now, politically exposed person concept is from the perspective of the bank, right? Now, a common layman has nothing to do with a person if he is a politically exposed guy or a non-politically exposed guy. It is from the bank's perspective. It is through the bank's eyes that they are looking into elements of politically exposed persons. Now, the most important risk that any bank would feel when they onboard or when they have a politically exposed person as their customer is that, you know, these politically exposed persons have the power to influence, right? They can influence people, they can influence systems around them, and they can do or commit some kind of financial crime. Since they have a lot of power, right? The banks are concerned. The banks do consider politically exposed persons as high risk customers, right? Next. The most important financial crime we see that most of the politically exposed persons do is bribery and corruption, right? Bribery, taking bribe and doing some kind of a corruption, right? Interfering with the contracts, right? So bribery and corruption is the commonest crime, right? That is associated with your politically exposed persons. Now, especially these politically exposed persons, they derive a lot of wealth, right? If they are corrupt, if a politically exposed person is a corrupt individual, he derives a lot of wealth, he generates a lot of fortune, he generates a lot of wealth illegally, not legally, right? So when someone derives a lot of wealth illegally, they won't be very happy to show it off, right? They will always try to hide the ownership, right? So at times these people they can simply show that they are investing this money into genuine organizations, genuine companies, and they will try to hide their ownership. And incorrect asset declarations, right? So any person who derives a lot of fortune through illegal means, he won't be very happy to declare his assets. He will try to hide, or he will try to give incorrect information while declaring their assets. Next. And especially the PEPs are connected to high risk countries and high risk industries, right? High risk industries, for example, you have your gaming industry, and you have your arms and ammunition industry, right? So politically exposed persons do have a lot of interest in these kinds of industries, in these kind of businesses, because they could generate a lot of money. They could generate a lot of black money in these industries. And high risk countries, and they may be related to high risk countries because the rules and regulations, right, the compliance is very weak in these high risk jurisdictions, which will enable these politically exposed persons, right, to commit a lot of crime, right, and thereby do a lot of money laundering. So basically these are all the concerns, right, that the bank has in its mind when it thinks about a politically exposed person. Now, considering it is so risky, the banks must adopt a highly risk-based approach, right, to deal with these kind of customers. Banks cannot simply deny offering their products and services to a politically exposed person, right? So the banks will take precautionary measures to ensure that they mitigate the risks that are associated with these politically exposed persons. Next. So what is the regulation? What are the rules? What is the governing rules and regulations around this politically exposed persons, right? So the head regulator, the most important regulator of AML is your FATF, the global regulator of anti-money laundering. Your Financial Action Task Force, in its recommendations 12 and 22, right, has precisely spoken about how banks or financial institutions can deal with the politically exposed persons. So very simple, the FATF has clearly indicated how to deal with politically exposed persons, right? Now, all these measures that the bank might take to mitigate the risk that is associated with a politically exposed persons are preventive in nature, right? See, if I say someone is a PEP, that doesn't indicate that person is a criminal. A PEP is not a criminal, but there are high chances, there is a high possibility, there is a high probability that a PEP could commit the financial crime. That is the reason why the bank wants to take a precautionary measure, a preventive measure, right? So the banks do not consider all politically exposed persons as criminals. Of course, they will offer products and services to politically exposed persons, but they take preventive measures, right? Now, as a preventive measure, the bank will induce the enhanced due diligence, right? So what is enhanced due diligence? Increased due diligence on these customers. For example, when you're working on your case, when you're working on a customer, if you see any exposure of politically exposed persons in that business, right? So that would automatically trigger the enhanced due diligence. In simple words, if your customer, if your business have an exposure to any politically exposed person, or if the politically exposed person is involved, or if he is associated with the business, right, the KYC that needs to be performed is your enhanced due diligence. So enhanced due diligence in simple terms are the additional measures, right? So additional measures that needs to be taken because we have a politically exposed person associated with the business. So EDD, enhanced due diligence, is the most important step when you find or when you identify a politically exposed person. Now, interestingly, we have two important principles that goes with politically exposed persons concept, right? So the first principle, these are very simple principles, right? The first principle is once a PEP is always a PEP. Once a PEP is always a PEP. So if any individual holds a significant position, at least for once in his lifetime, right, he will be considered as a political exposed person for the rest of his life. For example, you take Donald Trump. Donald Trump, right, was the head of United States, right, for 5 years, right. Suppose that, currently he is no longer the head of United States, but still he will be considered as a politically exposed person, because once in the past he was a politically exposed person. So he would have certain kind of an influence. Still he would have a lot of influence, right? That is the reason why the banks would consider these people as politically exposed persons, even though they are not holding any significant position in the moment of time, in the current, in the moment of time today. Now, the second principle is your PEP associates. So all the family members, all the blood relatives and close associates of a politically exposed person are also considered as politically exposed persons. So the spouse, which means the wife or husband of a politically exposed person, the children, the parents, right, the siblings, uncles, aunts, right, and even indirect family members like in-laws. So all these people who are closely associated, it could be blood relation or close relation or spousal relation, right, family member relation, all these people are also considered as politically exposed persons. That now you may have this question, why would the bank consider them as politically exposed person? What is harm? What is risk? That is, now many times we hear these things, right, the son of a politician has done some kind of a some kind of a financial crime. The father-in-law of a very big politician has done this kind of a financial crime. So these people who are around a politically exposed person, who are around a powerful person, will derive the power as well, right? They also will start influencing things and systems around them, and they can also commit, there is a high chance that these people can also do financial crime, right? So that is the reason why PEP associates, close associates, spousal relationship, family members, blood relatives, all these categories of people who are associated with a PEP are also considered as politically exposed person. So the bank would consider them as a politically exposed person. Next is the types of politically exposed persons. So we have basically 4 types of politically exposed persons: domestic, corporate, international or foreign, and heads of international organizations. Let's quickly look at these types. Domestic. Now I informed you earlier that a PEP is from the perspective of the bank, right? Now, for example, for HDFC Bank in India, right? So the domicile of HDFC Bank is India. So for HDFC in India, these people, right, Mr. Modi, right, the RBI governor and the Chief Justice of India, right, these people are considered as domestic PEPs because Modi, Chief Justice of India, or RBI governor, so all these people are holding a very important, significant, powerful position in the country in which HDFC is located. No, they are not in some other country. They are in the domicile country of the bank, which is why for HDFC, these people are considered as politically exposed persons domestically, or domestic politically exposed persons. The next is your corporate PEP. So the heads, right, the promoters of large corporates, right, you have your Reliance, which is a corporation, you have your Tatas, which is a very big corporation, which is a very big business empire. So these people are also considered as politically exposed persons, because most of these people do have a lot of power. They maintain close relationships with the politicians, right? We all know that. So banks would also consider these kind of people as politically exposed persons, as we call them as corporate politically exposed persons. Next, you have your international or foreign politically exposed persons. And now you can see in front of you, you have Mr. Joe Biden, the President of America, and you have Bolsonaro, the President of Brazil. Now these people are holding a significant position, a powerful position in a different country. So for HDFC Bank in India, Joe Biden is a foreign PEP. Bolsonaro is a foreign PEP because their domicile is in a different country, right? So for HDFC Bank in India, Joe Biden and Bolsonaro, these guys are foreign PEPs or international PEPs, right? Next, heads of international organizations. You have your international organizations like, you have your Human Rights Commission, United Nations, European Union, World Health Organization. So basically the heads, the top-notch officials of these institutions are also considered as politically exposed persons, right? They don't belong to any country, which is why the banks would consider them as a head of international organizations as politically exposed persons. You have on the screen, you have Mr. Antonio, who is the head of United Nations, and Mr. Tedros, who is the head of World Health Organization. So these people, the banks do classify them as heads of international organizations, and these people would also fall in the category of a politically exposed person. Yes. Next, let's try to see how do we identify a PEP. Okay, the most important part, right? Now, you must be working for a foreign bank, maybe HSBC, UK jurisdiction, or maybe ABN AMRO, some other country, Netherlands, or you may be working for Bank of America, which is a US bank, right? So you will be working in a country other than the jurisdiction of the bank, right? So you hardly know any of these people. We really do not know about these people. We really cannot simply just by looking at a person's name or looking at a person's ID proof, we cannot simply identify if that person is a politically exposed person or not. So how do we do that? How do we identify a politically exposed person? The first way is the screening, right? Screening is the most prominent way that the banks would use to identify a politically exposed persons, right? So the banks would use technical screening tools like WorldCheck, RDC, Regulatory Data Corp, and LexisNexis. There are many tools out there in the market. We will discuss more about screening, right, when we talk about screening. But as of now, name screening, right? So when you have your customer, right, you will do the name screening. Through name screening, right, by using their name, their date of birth, their address, their nationality. By using these details, we will input these details into these tools to check if you have any hits, that are politically exposed in nature, right? Or internet or media searches, right? So the compliance officer can also check the internet and do media search to identify, right, if the particular individual is a politically exposed person. Or they can also identify a politically exposed person through commercial and in-house database checks, right? So there are many commercial third-party platforms which offer solutions, right? So the banks would also use this, or the banks may also have an inbuilt database, right? Or a government issued database, right? So the government issued list or in-house built list, the bank can cross-verify and see if a specific individual is a politically exposed person or not. And in cases where we cannot identify a person as a politically exposed, because it's a very dynamic thing, right? Today I may not be a politically exposed person, but tomorrow I may gain some position, right? But I'm not going to do screening every day on an individual, right? Right. So that is when your relationship manager or the customer declares themselves as politically exposed persons, right? That could also be a possibility to identify the politically exposed persons, where customer themselves, they will identify, they will declare that they play a role of a politically exposed person. They talk about their positions, right? So basically, when we screen, we screen on all the related parties of a business, right? It could be directors, beneficial owners. So basically we will try to screen on all the related parties of a customer, right? So those could be beneficial owners, senior management, principal controllers, authorized signatories and directors. So basically the compliance analyst will screen on all the related parties to see if there are any politically related, any PEP related issues or hits that they could find out, right? Next, that is how you identify your politically exposed person. And what is the compliance response? What does that mean? So when the bank identifies that a particular individual is a politically exposed person, what would the bank do? Right? So when the bank identifies someone as a politically exposed person, the risk rating of the customer goes up. So the bank would consider to increase the risk rating of the customer. So the risk rating will then be tagged as high, right? So the presence of politically exposed person will make the risk rating high, right? And when the risk rating becomes high, it would trigger an enhanced due diligence, right? So the bank will perform additional due diligence, enhanced due diligence on politically exposed persons. For example, like they may try to constantly monitor these kind of people. The banks would increase the ongoing monitoring mechanism. The transaction monitoring would be in place. Source of wealth validation. The banks would also request source of wealth certificates or source of wealth declarations, or the banks would conduct the source of wealth review on these politically exposed persons, right? And finally, in some instances, when the bank identifies a presence of a politically exposed persons, they may have internal policy which requires them to take approvals from their senior management, right? So the AML team, the KYC team, to process or to continue the relationship with these kinds of customers, they may go and take approval from their senior management, top level management, right? AML related top level management, once they can provide their approval, only then we can continue with these kinds of customers. That is the compliance response. And finally, we have a case study, right? This is an example. The person on the screen is Mr. Paolo Lazarenko. In the past, during 1996 and 1997, he was the Prime Minister of Ukraine, right? So it was found out that Mr. Paolo is involved into money laundering and many other illegal activities, right? This person has got a lot of bank accounts in United States. So he was maintaining a lot of bank accounts in United States where he was doing a lot of money laundering and he was deriving a lot of money through illegal activities, and he is putting all that money in these bank accounts, right? So this is one of the examples. There are so many examples out there. Even in your everyday life, you can see a lot of people, high profile people doing that crime, high profile person involved in this crime, right? So which is the reason why the banks will not tolerate, or the banks will not go lenient on politically exposed persons, right? The most important thing, the banks has to identify, and when they identify a politically exposed person, they will keep on monitoring. They will track this customer. They will track the PEP. They will do the enhanced due diligence on the the politically exposed person.